Usually when we think about failure, in science or big corporate projects, we have a very specific image in our heads. We think of failure as being loud.
Right. It's the rocket exploding on the launch pad.
Exactly.
Or it's the CEO in handcuffs, the massive data scandal. It's an event.
Yes, an event. It has a timestamp. You can point to it and say, that's when it all went wrong. It's dramatic, it's visible. But today, we're doing a deep dive into something completely different.
And honestly, something much more unsettling. We're looking at a phenomenon that's quieter, slower, and much, much harder to spot because it doesn't look like a disaster.
It looks like nothing.
It looks like nothing at all.
We're looking at a specific scientific undertaking, a major celebrated experiment that did not fail. It wasn't debunked. It wasn't a fraud.
No, it was fully funded, totally legitimate. It was successful in its data collection.
Yeah.
And yet, it completely vanished.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this idea of erasure by bureaucracy.
And we should be clear, we aren't looking for a conspiracy here. There are no men in black suits shredding documents in an alley.
Which is almost disappointing in a way. We've been trained to expect the villain.
It would be more exciting if there were. But the reality these documents describe is, I think, much more terrifying because of how normal it is. It's about how real, legitimate knowledge can simply be left behind.
Just because it becomes inconvenient.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's set the stage, because I want to make sure you, the listener, really understand the scale of this. The first thing that jumped out at me from these documents was that this wasn't some garage project.
Oh, far from it. To understand the erasure, you have to understand the height it fell from. This project was the golden child of its field.
The golden child.
The source material is very clear. This research was addressing a fundamental question that scientists have been struggling with for decades.
So like a holy grail type of problem.
Exactly. A known problem, a high-value target. And this experiment was seen as the innovative solution. The sources mention that funding arrived incredibly quickly.
And in academia, that's everything. You spend years writing grants just to get rejected.
Right. You're usually fighting for scraps. But here, the money tap turned on immediately.
Which signals institutional belief. The university, the grant committees, they were all in.
All in. It became a reference point right away. Papers were published. It was discussed openly at conferences. The vibe was serious, professional, optimistic.
And that's a crucial detail, isn't it? The transparency. They were publishing preliminary findings. They were inviting peer review. If you were looking at this project in its early days, you'd see a model of healthy science.
It checked every single box for legitimacy. It was in the journals, public lectures, research summaries, no controversy about the methods, just high-quality work.
And that's what makes the next part so strange. Because usually when a project disappears, you can find the scar. You can say, that's where the data didn't add up, or that's where the ethical violation happened.
You can find the scandal.
But here...
nothing. And I mean that literally. Nothing.
So let's walk through the turning point, though calling it a turning point feels wrong. It's more a slow leak.
That's a much better analogy. The source describes this shift not as an explosion, but as a change in frequency, a gradual dialing down of the volume.
The experiment was never declared a failure.
Never. No press release saying we're shutting this down.
It's like being ghosted. They don't break up with you, they just stop texting back as quickly.
In a way, yes, but on an institutional level with millions of dollars in careers on the line, the signs of erasure were subtle. First, the bibliography references changed.
How so?
New publications in the field just stopped citing the experiment. It fell off the reading list.
But how does that happen? If it was so central, how do people just agree to forget at the same time?
Well, it's the mechanism of the trend in science, isn't it? Ongoing discussions, the panels, the roundtables, they started moving away. It wasn't a coordinated boycott, it was a collective drift.
And what about the project management side? The paper trail? The quarterly reports, the annual updates?
According to the records, initially, those updates were just delayed.
The standard corporate tactic. The check is in the mail.
Right. Oh, we're waiting on one more data set, or we need to recalibrate. We'll release that next month. But eventually, those delays turned into quiet cancellations.
The meeting gets pushed to next quarter, then next year.
And then it just drops off the calendar entirely.
Yeah.
And because everyone is busy, nobody circles back to check.
And here's where it gets really unsettling for me. The non-event. The source points out there was no retraction, no public disagreement.
No. It wasn't that another scientist came out and said, this is wrong and here's why. It was just absence.
And that absence is so powerful. A conflict, a retraction that creates a record. It creates a debate.
And a debate keeps the topic alive. Even if you're arguing against a theory, you're keeping it in the conversation. But just stopping.
It leaves no trace.
It makes it difficult to even realize something is missing unless you were there when it started.
It reminds me of that saying, the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference.
Precisely. But the question is how? How does that actually happen? If there wasn't a directive from on high saying, kill this project, how does a celebrated experiment just evaporate?
Yeah, because someone has to sign the checks. Someone has to allocate the lab space. Someone has to decide we aren't doing this anymore.
And this brings us to what the source calls the mechanism of silence. There's a line here that I think is the most important sentence in the whole stack. It says, in research environments, silence does not require orders.
That is chilling. Silence does not require orders. Break that down for us.
It means that erasure is often a passive process. It's the default state of a bureaucracy if you don't actively fight against it. Think about how these institutions work. Funding priorities shift naturally.
A new director comes in with a different focus.
Exactly. Careers move on, people get promoted, they transfer.
So it's like a garden. If you stop watering a specific plant, you don't have to go out and chop it down. It just withers.
That's the perfect metaphor. Without explicit instructions to keep the experiment alive, attention just redirects elsewhere. The experiment wasn't banned. It wasn't disproven.
It was just quietly left behind.
And because everyone is busy chasing the next grant, the next publication, no one stops to ask, hey, whatever happened to that major thing we were all excited about 3 years ago?
It's the path of least resistance.
It's inertia. Bureaucracy is a heavy machine. It takes energy to keep things moving. If you stop supplying the energy, the attention, the advocacy, the machine just rolls over it.
But I still have a hard time with that. Because if the data was amazing, surely someone would have kept watering that plant. Scientists are curious people. They wouldn't just let it drift away because of paperwork.
You're right. And that leads to the deeper question, why? Why did this happen to this specific experiment? Because you're right, if the result was, we found the cure for the common cold, it wouldn't have been silenced.
Right. Success is loud. Profit is loud.
And this is the part I found most fascinating. The section on the inconvenient truth. The source states very clearly, the data was not wrong.
Okay, so we rule out error. It wasn't a mistake.
If the data were wrong, it would be easy. You publish a correction, you learn, you move on. That's the scientific method. But here, the data was accurate. The problem was that the findings were ambiguous.
Ambiguous? How?
It didn't produce a dramatic conclusion. We love dramatic conclusions. Binary outcomes. X causes Y. This drug works or it doesn't.
But this didn't do that.
No. It revealed patterns that raised uncomfortable questions.
Uncomfortable for who? The scientists.
For the institution. For the funders. The data challenged existing assumptions. It suggested that the problem they were trying to solve was much, much messier than they thought.
So it wasn't a solution, it was a complication.
A massive complication. And perhaps most fatally, the source notes that the findings offered no simple applications.
Ah, there it is. Not a product you could package and sell.
Sure.
Not a headline you could put on the university website to attract donors.
It was messy. And institutions, corporate or academic, they hate messiness. The source calls the data inconvenient. Inconvenient data doesn't attract long-term support because it requires explaining. It requires nuance.
I can just see the meeting. The board asks, so, did it work? And you have to say, well, it's complicated. It actually shows our entire approach might be flawed and we need to rethink the baseline.
And the board says, next.
Exactly. It sounds like the data created a risk for the institution. If you have data that challenges the way things are done, that's a liability.
It is. Explaining a lack of a clear outcome is so much harder than explaining a clear failure. If you fail, you can say, we tried, it didn't work, we learned. It's heroic in a way.
Fits the narrative.
But if you succeed in finding something that makes everything else look complicated, that raises questions about oversight, about investment strategy. Why did we spend millions on this if the answer is just, it's complicated?
So the silence becomes the strategic solution.
Yes. By allowing the experiment to fade, you avoid those questions. You don't have to justify the ambiguity if you just stop talking about it.
That is such a cynical but probably accurate view of how these large organizations function.
It's systemic self-preservation. It's not one evil person at the top. It's the immune system of the bureaucracy rejecting a foreign object. And the foreign object, in this case, was complexity.
So where does that leave us? What's the aftermath? The notes say the experiment is now difficult to trace in current discourse.
It is. If you were a new PhD student entering this field today, you likely wouldn't even know this experiment happened.
You'd be reinventing the wheel without knowing the wheel was already invented and just stored in the basement.
Or worse, you'd be chasing the same dead ends this experiment already proved were dead ends, simply because that knowledge wasn't passed down.
But, and this is a crucial distinction the text makes, the data hasn't been deleted. This isn't 1984.
No, not at all. The records exist. The hard drives are probably in a server room somewhere. The papers are in a library basement. It hasn't been scrubbed from history. What disappeared was the conversation.
It really changes my definition of silence. I always thought it meant a lack of information, a blank page. But here, silence is a behavior. It's a choice to look away.
It's an active filtering of reality. And the source ends with this very poignant assessment. In science, silence doesn't always mean the work was irrelevant. We assume the market of ideas is efficient, that the good stuff rises to the top.
But this proves the market isn't infinite.
Not always. Sometimes silence just means the answers arrived, but no one knew what to do with them.
That's heavy. It implies there's a limit to what our institutions can digest. We have this romantic idea of science as a relentless pursuit of truth, but this suggests it's also a social system.
Absolutely. And if the truth is too awkward, the system just rejects it. It's performed by humans within bureaucracies, funded by organizations with goals. When knowledge falls outside those goals, not because it's false, but because it's inconvenient, it gets orphaned.
So it's the difference between knowledge and accepted knowledge. This experiment produced knowledge, facts, but it never became accepted because that part requires a social buy-in.
And that buy-in is fragile. It relies on momentum. Once that momentum is lost, it's incredibly difficult to restart. The data becomes a fossil before it was ever really understood.
Which forces us to look at the gaps.
Yes. We have to learn to read the silence. When a topic that was once everywhere suddenly vanishes, we shouldn't just assume it was solved or debunked. We should ask, why did the conversation stop? Who benefited from the silence?
And was the answer just too complicated for the room?
Often, that's exactly it. We live in a world that craves simplicity. Headlines, tweets, elevator pitches. Complexity is a hard sell, but reality is complex.
And if our institutions filter that out, we're left with a very distorted map of the world. A map with giant blank spots where the inconvenient mountains used to be.
And those blank spots are where the real risks usually hide. Just because you stop talking about a complex problem doesn't mean the problem goes away.
We're just flying blind.
Exactly.
This has been a fascinating look at the mechanics of how we forget. It's not memory loss, it's an attention shift. The experiment is still there, waiting for someone to blow the dust off the guile.
And maybe, just maybe, now that enough time has passed, someone will. Sometimes the data has to wait for the world to be ready for the questions it raises.
Let's wrap this up. We've looked at a celebrated experiment that didn't fail, but was starved of attention because its findings were inconveniently complex.
We've seen how bureaucracy acts as a silent eraser, and how erasure isn't always about shredding documents. Often, it's just about shifting the spotlight till the truth is just sitting in the dark.
So here's the question we want to leave you with. If valid, expensive, proven data can be silenced simply by ignoring it, how many other lost chapters of knowledge are sitting in the archives right now?
How many breakthroughs are gathering dust, fully proven but completely forgotten, simply because they didn't fit the narrative of their time?
And what would happen if we went back and read them? Thanks for diving deep with us.